The sun had barely risen over the misty mountains as Michael made his way up the winding path to the monastery. The cool morning air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, yet his mind was anything but serene. His thoughts swirled with frustration, anxiety, and a deep sense of exhaustion. Life had become an endless cycle of stress, workplace conflicts, financial pressures, and the weight of expectations from those around him. He felt like a boat caught in a storm, constantly battered by waves of negativity and doubt. For years, Michael had prided himself on being strong and resilient, but lately, he found himself growing more irritable and easily affected by the words and actions of others. A single harsh comment could ruin his entire day. The pressure to succeed weighed heavily on him, leaving little room for joy or peace. He had heard about the monastery from a friend who had visited before. "Stay for 10 days, the friend had said. "Speak to the master there. He has a way of helping people see things differently." And so, with nothing to lose, Michael found himself standing before an ancient wooden gate, unsure of what he was searching for. The monastery was a simple yet beautiful place, nestled between towering trees and rolling hills. The scent of incense lingered in the air, and the rhythmic sound of a wooden bell echoed in the distance. As he stepped through the gate, he was met by an elderly monk with kind, knowing eyes. His shaved head and flowing robes gave him an air of quiet dignity. This was Master Lao Tam, the teacher Michael had come to see. "Welcome," the old monk said, his voice calm and steady. "You have traveled far, but the real journey begins now." Michael hesitated before speaking. "I feel lost. No matter what I do, I'm always affected by what people say and do. I get angry, frustrated, and overwhelmed. I just want to find peace." Master Lao Tam smiled and gestured toward a stone bench beneath a cherry blossom tree. They sat together, in silence for a moment before the monk finally spoke. "Imagine a pond," he said. "If you throw a stone into it, the water ripples, but eventually it settles. The pond does not hold on to the disturbance. It simply returns to stillness." Michael frowned. "So you're saying I should just ignore everything?" "No," Master Lao Tam replied. "I am saying that you must learn how to return to stillness." Michael exhaled slowly, uncertain but intrigued. "If you truly wish to free yourself from these burdens, stay here for 10 days, the monk continued. "Each day I will teach you one principle that will help you build an unshakable mind. When you leave, the world will not change, but you will." Michael nodded. He had spent years searching for peace outside of himself. Perhaps it was time to look within. And so, his journey began. Day 1. The power of letting go. Michael woke early to the soft chime of the monastery bell. As he stepped outside, he saw Master Lao Tam waiting for him in the meditation garden. The old monk motioned for him to sit on a wooden bench nearby. "Today," the master began, "we will talk about the first principle, letting go of offense." Michael's brow furrowed. "Letting go? How do you just forget when someone insults or mistreats you?" Master Lao Tam picked up a small stone and tossed it into the koi pond before them. The water rippled for a moment before returning to stillness. "Did you see what happened?" he asked. "Yes," Michael replied. "The water moved, but then it calmed down." "Exactly," the monk nodded. "The pond does not cling to the disturbance. It lets it pass. But humans, we tend to hold on to insults, turning them over in our minds, letting them stir our emotions." Michael sighed. "But it's not easy. Words can hurt. Only if you let them," Master Lao Tam said. "Holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. If someone offers you a gift of anger, you can refuse to accept it. You have a choice." Michael sat in silence, absorbing the lesson. For years he had let the words of others dictate his emotions. Could it really be that simple? Could he choose not to accept the negativity? As they sat watching the koi fish swim lazily in the pond, Michael made a quiet vow to himself to begin practicing the art of letting go. It would not be easy, but for the first time in a long while, he felt a small sense of control over his own peace. And so, the first lesson had begun. Day 2. Learning from every person. The following morning, Michael found Master Lao Tam sweeping the stone pathway outside the meditation hall. The old monk greeted him with a nod and handed him a broom. Today we will speak of learning from every person, Master Lao Tam said as he continued sweeping. Michael took the broom hesitantly. What do you mean? Master Lao Tam paused and gestured toward a young novice monk struggling to carry a heavy bucket of water across the courtyard. The boy spilled some, but instead of getting frustrated, he carefully adjusted his grip and kept moving. You see that boy? The master asked. He is your teacher today. Michael frowned. But he's just a child. Indeed, the master replied. But he teaches patience and perseverance. Every person we meet has something to teach us, whether through their wisdom or their mistakes. Michael reflected on this as he continued sweeping. He had always thought of learning as something that came from experts, not from everyday interactions. Could it be that he had overlooked valuable lessons all around him? As the morning passed, Michael watched the monks closely. He noticed an elderly monk moving with deliberate care, embodying mindfulness. A younger monk worked diligently, showing discipline. Even a bird landing on a nearby tree reminded him of adaptability. By the end of the day, Michael understood. Wisdom was everywhere. If only he was open to seeing it. The key to personal growth is humility, the willingness to learn from every encounter, regardless of its source. And so, the second lesson had begun. Day 3. Transforming envy into motivation. Michael woke up feeling restless. The previous lessons had given him a new perspective, yet he still felt a pang of dissatisfaction deep within. That morning, as he walked through the monastery, he noticed a young monk effortlessly balancing on one foot while practicing martial arts. The monk's movements were fluid, precise, and filled with confidence. A wave of envy washed over Michael. He had always admired those who excelled in their craft, but instead of inspiration, he often felt inadequate in comparison. He sighed, watching the monk perform a perfect sequence of movements. Sensing his turmoil, Master Lao Tam approached and stood beside him. Do you admire his skill? The monk asked. Michael hesitated before nodding. Yes, but I can't help but feel lesser. It reminds me of everything I lack. Master Lao Tam chuckled softly. Envy is natural, but it is also a choice. You can let it consume you, or you can let it inspire you. The success of others does not diminish your own potential. Instead of comparing, learn. Instead of resenting, grow. Michael absorbed the words carefully. So, rather than feeling bad about what I don't have, I should use it as motivation to improve myself. The monk nodded. Exactly. Instead of seeing excellence as something that distances you from others, let it serve as a guide to what is possible. Michael watched the young monk again, but this time with a different mindset. Rather than feeling discouraged, he felt challenged. A determination stirred within him. That day he began observing and learning rather than resenting. He practiced patience with himself, knowing that growth came with time and effort. By the end of the day, Michael had taken his first step in transforming envy into motivation. The feeling of inadequacy had not disappeared completely, but now he knew how to harness it for his own growth. And so, the third lesson had truly begun. That morning, Michael observed two young monks sparring in the courtyard. One moved gracefully, executing each technique with precision, while the other struggled, his movements lacking confidence. A flicker of envy stirred within Michael as he watched the more skilled monk. Sensing his thoughts, Master Lao Tam said, Instead of envying others, use their excellence as inspiration. Michael nodded slowly. Throughout the day, he reflected on the idea of letting admiration fuel self-improvement rather than resentment. By evening, he had made a decision to transform his envy into a force for growth. And so, the third lesson had begun. Day 4. Balancing discipline and compassion. Michael woke up to the rhythmic sound of chanting, filling the morning air with a serene energy. He stepped outside to find Master Lao Tam carefully tending to a small bonsai tree. The old monk motioned for Michael to sit beside him. Today's lesson, Master Lao Tam began, is about balance between discipline and compassion. Michael watched as the master gently pruned a stray branch. A tree must be shaped with care, the monk continued. Too much force and it breaks. Too little and it grows wild. The same applies to how we treat ourselves and others. Michael reflected on his own struggles. He often pushed himself too hard, setting unrealistic expectations, yet he was quick to judge others when they failed. How do we find that balance? He asked. Master Lao Tam smiled. Discipline is about self-respect, holding ourselves accountable without cruelty. Compassion is about understanding, offering others the patience we also deserve. Just then, a young novice stumbled while carrying a heavy pot of water. Instead of reprimanding him, Master Lao Tam stepped forward, showing the novice a steadier way to hold the pot. You see, the master said, turning back to Michael. When we expect much from ourselves, we grow. When we guide others with kindness, they grow. Michael nodded, understanding now that true strength lay in balance. That day, as he went about his tasks, he practiced patience with himself and with those around him. And so the fourth lesson had begun. Michael awoke to the sound of chanting in the distance. As he stepped outside, he saw Master Lao Tam tending to the monastery garden. The old monk motioned for him to join. Today we speak of discipline and compassion, the master said. True strength is holding ourselves accountable while being kind to others. Michael observed, as a novice monk struggled with a task. Instead of scolding, Master Lao Tam gently guided him. You see, the master continued, we must expect the best from ourselves, but remain patient with others. Discipline is not about harshness, it is about consistency and self-respect. Michael pondered this. He had always been critical of himself and impatient with others. But now, he saw a new path, one where balance and understanding could coexist. And so the fourth lesson had begun. Day 5. The strength of inner peace. Michael found Master Lao Tam sitting on a stone bench under the shade of a towering oak tree. The master's expression was serene, as if nothing in the world could disturb his calm. Michael sat down beside him, eager for the day's lesson. Today's teaching, Master Lao Tam began, is about protecting your inner peace. No external force can harm you unless you allow it. Michael furrowed his brow. But what if someone insults me or treats me unfairly? How do I not feel hurt? The master picked up a small cup and held it out. Imagine this cup is your peace, he said. If I try to take it from you, what must you do for me to succeed? Michael thought for a moment. I would have to let go of it. Master Lao Tam nodded. Exactly. When someone throws anger or insults at you, they are trying to take your peace. But if you hold on to it, they cannot succeed. Michael sat in thought, realizing how often he had surrendered his peace to others' words and actions. So, if I don't react, I keep my peace intact? Yes, the master replied. True strength is not in fighting every battle, but in knowing which battles to walk away from. You do not have to accept every burden handed to you. Michael exhaled, feeling a newfound sense of clarity. For years, he had let the words of others dictate his emotions. But now, he saw another way, to remain steady, like a tree that does not sway with every passing wind. And so, the fifth lesson had begun. Michael found Master Lao Tam seated beneath an old oak tree, eyes closed in meditation. He approached quietly, and sat beside him, waiting for guidance. Today's lesson, the master finally spoke, is about inner peace. No one can truly harm you unless you allow them to. Michael frowned. But what if someone insults me, or treats me unfairly? Master Lao Tam opened his eyes and picked up a small leaf. Imagine this leaf is an insult, he said, placing it in Michael's hand. Now, hold on to it tightly. Michael clenched the leaf in his fist. Does it hurt you? The master asked. No, Michael replied, confused. Now, imagine holding it forever, never letting go. Over time, it crumbles, turns to dust, and leaves a stain on your hand. That is what happens when you hold on to negativity, Michael looked down at the leaf, understanding the metaphor. If you don't hold on to the insult, it holds no power over you, the master continued. The true strength is in letting go and remaining at peace. Michael exhaled slowly, realizing how often he had carried the weight of past wounds. From that day, he resolved to protect his inner peace, knowing that true resilience came from within. And so, the 5th lesson had begun. Day 6. Accepting what cannot be changed, the morning was quiet, with a gentle breeze rustling the leaves. Michael found Master Lao Tam stacking firewood near the temple's entrance. The monk smiled and gestured for Michael to sit beside him. Today's lesson is about acceptance, the master began. There are things in life we can change and things we cannot. Wisdom is knowing the difference. Michael nodded, recalling all the times he had fought against circumstances beyond his control, wasting energy, feeling frustrated, and losing his peace. But how do we accept things that hurt us? He asked. Master Lao Tam picked up a twig and placed it in the firewood pile. When a storm comes, he said, does the tree fight the wind? Michael shook his head. No, it bends. Exactly, the master said. Resisting reality only causes suffering. Acceptance does not mean giving up. It means adapting, finding strength in the flow of life rather than fighting against it. Michael watched the flickering flames in the small fire pit nearby. He thought about all the moments in his life where he had struggled against the inevitable. Arguments he could not win, losses he could not prevent. What if, instead of resisting, he had simply allowed himself to move forward? Master Lao Tam continued, think of the river. It does not complain when it meets a rock in its path. It simply flows around it. If you learn to move like the river, life will become lighter. Michael exhaled, feeling a sense of release. For the first time, he understood that true peace came not from controlling everything, but from letting go of what was beyond his reach. And so, the 6th lesson had begun. Day 7. Living in harmony with nature. Michael awoke to the sound of birds singing outside his window. As he stepped into the monastery's garden, he saw Master Lao Tam tending to a small patch of herbs. The old monk looked up and smiled, gesturing for Michael to join him. Today's lesson, Master Lao Tam began, is about living in harmony with nature. Michael knelt beside the monk and watched as he gently removed weeds without disturbing the surrounding plants. Nature teaches us patience, balance, and impermanence, the master continued. When we align ourselves with its rhythms, we find peace. Michael thought about his fast-paced life back home, always rushing, always feeling like he was fighting against time. But how do we live in harmony with nature in a modern world? He asked. Master Lao Tam smiled. It starts with awareness. Observe the cycles of nature, the rising and setting sun, the ebb and flow of the seasons. Accept that everything has its time. He pointed to a river flowing nearby. The river does not resist its path. It flows where it must. Yet it is powerful, carving valleys over time. Learn from the river. Move with life rather than against it. Michael exhaled, feeling a sense of connection to his surroundings. He realized how much he had been resisting change and forcing outcomes in his life. Perhaps, like the river, he needed to trust the journey. That evening, as he sat under the stars, Michael felt lighter. He made a promise to himself to slow down, to appreciate the beauty of each moment, and to live more in tune with the world around him. And so, the 7th lesson had begun. Day 8. The Power of Ethical Living. Michael found Master Lao Tam arranging simple offerings at the temple altar: fresh fruit, incense, and a small bowl of rice. The old monk motioned for Michael to sit beside him. Today's lesson is about ethical living, Master Lao Tam began. A peaceful mind is built on the foundation of integrity. Michael considered this. But what does ethical living have to do with inner peace? He asked. The master smiled. When we act with honesty, kindness, and respect, our conscience remains clear. We do not carry the burden of regret or deception. He gestured toward the temple's entrance, where a group of monks quietly shared their meal. Do you see how they eat? No one takes more than they need. No one hoards. They live in harmony with one another because their hearts are free from selfishness. Michael nodded, reflecting on the stress he had endured in his own life. Deals made with half-truths, relationships strained by mistrust. So, by living ethically, we lighten the weight we carry in our minds. Exactly, Master Lao Tam said. When your actions align with your values, you sleep peacefully. You walk through life without fear of being exposed, without guilt, clouding your thoughts. Michael thought of all the times he had compromised his values for success, only to find himself restless and anxious. Perhaps true peace came not from winning at all costs, but from knowing he had done what was right. That evening, as he watched the monks move through their simple routines with contentment, Michael resolved to live with more integrity. Not just for others, but for himself. And so the 8th lesson had begun. Day 9. The Power of Gratitude. Michael found Master Lao Tam walking through the monastery garden, pausing occasionally to admire the flowers and trees. The old monk gestured for Michael to join him. Today's lesson is about gratitude, the master said. A heart filled with gratitude knows peace. Michael sighed. It's hard to feel grateful when life is full of challenges. Master Lao Tam smiled and pointed to a small wildflower growing between the stones. This flower blooms without asking for anything in return. It finds joy in simply existing. Gratitude is much the same. It is about appreciating what is, rather, than longing for what isn't. Michael pondered this as they continued walking. The air was fresh, the morning sun warm against his skin. How often had he overlooked such simple blessings? They stopped near a large tree, its roots deep and strong. Gratitude, the master continued, is not about ignoring hardships, but about seeing the gifts hidden within them. Every experience, even the painful ones, teaches us something valuable. That evening, Michael sat by his window, reflecting on the day. He thought of the kindness he had received, the lessons he had learned, and the small moments of joy he had so often ignored. With a deep breath, he whispered a quiet, "Thank you," to the universe. And so, the 9th lesson had begun. Michael found Master Lao Tam sitting quietly in the monastery's garden, observing the early morning sunlight filtering through the leaves. The master motioned for Michael to sit beside him. Today's lesson is about gratitude, the monk said. A grateful heart transforms how we see the world. Michael sighed. I try to be grateful, but it's hard when life is full of problems. Master. Lao Tam picked up a single fallen leaf and held it up. This leaf may seem insignificant, yet it nourished the tree, provided shade, and will enrich the soil. Its journey is complete, and still, it serves a purpose. Michael considered this, realizing that even small things had value. Gratitude is not about ignoring difficulties, Master Lao Tam continued. It is about recognizing what is still good amidst the challenges. When we focus on what we lack, we suffer. When we focus on what we have, we find peace. Michael thought of his life. So much stress, so much worry. But had he ever truly appreciated the small joys? A kind word from a friend, a meal shared, a moment of quiet. He had taken them for granted. That evening, Michael sat under the stars and listed everything he was grateful for. The warmth of his bed, the wisdom of his teacher, the crisp mountain air. And for the first time in a long while, he felt content. And so, the 9th lesson had begun. Day 10. Trusting the path. Ahead on the morning of his final day at the monastery, Michael felt a quiet stillness within. He had arrived burdened with doubt and fear, but now he sensed a shift, an acceptance of the unknown. As he walked to the temple, he found Master Lao Tam waiting for him beneath a tall cedar tree. "Today we speak of trust," the master said. "Not in what you can see, but in what lies ahead." Michael exhaled. "I've always struggled with uncertainty. I've feared what I cannot control." Master Lao Tam gestured toward the misty mountains in the distance. The traveler walking through the fog cannot see the entire path, but he takes one step and then another. He does not stop because the destination is unclear. He trusts that the road will unfold as he moves forward. Michael nodded, absorbing the wisdom in the metaphor. So, trust isn't about knowing the outcome. It's about walking forward despite the unknown. The master smiled. Exactly. Clinging to control only creates suffering. When you trust yourself and the journey, fear loses its grip. Michael stood in silence, watching the wind sway the branches above. He realized that true peace came not from certainty, but from the courage to embrace uncertainty. As he prepared to leave, Master Lao Tam placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "The world will test you, but remember, your peace is not in avoiding the storm, but in learning to stand within it." Michael bowed deeply, his heart full of gratitude. With each step down the mountain, he carried with him not just the lessons of the past 10 days, but a newfound trust in the road ahead. And so, his journey truly began. On his final day at the monastery, Michael walked slowly through the courtyard, savoring the peaceful atmosphere. He found Master Lao Tam standing at the temple's entrance, gazing out at the distant mountains. "Today's lesson," the master said, "is about trust. Trust in yourself. Trust in the path ahead." Michael exhaled deeply. "I've always tried to control everything, outcomes, relationships, even my own emotions. But I've realized that some things are beyond control." Master Lao Tam nodded. "Like the river that carves its way through the mountains, life flows whether we resist or embrace it. When we release the need to control, we make space for clarity and growth." Michael watched the clouds drifting across the sky. "But how do I trust the unknown?" The monk smiled. "You already are. Each step you've taken here, each lesson you've embraced, is a sign of trust. When you let go of fear, you create room for faith." Michael stood in silence, letting the words settle within him. He had arrived full of doubt, weighed down by the past. Now he felt lighter, as if the burdens he once carried had loosened their grip. As he prepared to leave, Master Lao Tam placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "The world will challenge you, but remember, peace is not found in avoiding the storm, but in learning to stand firm within it." Michael nodded, gratitude swelling in his heart. With one last glance at the monastery, he turned to face the path ahead, ready to step forward with trust. And so, his final lesson had begun. A new beginning. Michael stood at the monastery gate, his bag packed and heart full. The 10 days had passed like a fleeting dream, yet the lessons he had learned felt deeply ingrained in his being. As he turned to face Master Lao Tam one last time. The old monk regarded him with the same serene expression as on the first day. "You have walked this path with an open heart," the master said. "But remember, wisdom is not in knowing these lessons. It is in living them." Michael nodded. He had come here seeking peace, expecting it to be something external, something given to him. But now, he understood. Peace was not something to be found. It was something to be cultivated from within. He thought back to the lessons, the power of letting go, learning from others, transforming envy into motivation, balancing discipline with compassion, guarding his inner peace, accepting what cannot be changed, living in harmony with nature, leading an ethical life, practicing gratitude, and finally, trusting in the unknown. Each principle had reshaped the way he viewed himself and the world. The fears and frustrations that had once consumed him no longer had the same power. He knew there would still be challenges ahead, moments of doubt and difficulty, but he no longer felt the need to control every outcome. Instead, he had learned to trust himself, to respond with wisdom rather than react with fear. Master Lao Tam reached into his robe and pulled out a small, smooth stone, placing it in Michael's palm. This stone was once rough, shaped by time and the elements, just as life has shaped you. Carry it as a reminder that even in hardship, we are being refined. Michael curled his fingers around the stone, feeling its cool weight. "Thank you, Master," he said, his voice steady. "For everything." The monk simply smiled. "Go forth with a still heart, and the world will move around you." With that, Michael stepped onto the path leading down the mountain. The air was crisp, the sky painted with the hues of dawn. He did not know what lay ahead, but for the first time in a long while, he was unafraid. And so, his new journey truly began. If this story resonated with you, if you too feel weighed down by life's pressures, try applying these principles to your own journey. Let your mind be like the still lake, able to return to peace no matter how strong the storm. If you found this story meaningful, share it with others. You never know who might need these lessons today. Subscribe for more Buddhist wisdom and mindfulness content. The path to peace begins within.